Hello, everybody. Welcome in. It is the Wrestling Mat. I am Matt Camp. Thanks for being with me, as always, right here at the Wrestling Mat Show. What's going on, everybody? Shout out to Nerdy Dude. Was I taking notes? I was getting ready for the program. Getting ready for the show today, as all of you are. Thanks for the members who are here for the live broadcast at 11:05 a.m. Eastern. Everybody else getting this, of course, later on in the day or whenever you watch it. But if you're a Matt member, you get this at 11:05 a.m. Eastern every single weekday here at the WrestlingMatchShow.com. You want to become a member? Come on over to the WrestlingMatchShow.com. If you're looking at this video, head down below. Hit that join button. Become a Matt member. Get some of those T-shirts that are now available. ProWrestlingTees.com/TheWrestlingMat. You get a discount if you're a Matt member on those Pro Wrestling Tees, Wrestling Matt merch shirts. Nerdy Dude has posted them himself on our social media, where you can follow us at WrestlingMat23 on Twitter and Instagram. But we'll have much more coming for you in the month of November. Maybe some retro Survivor Series, perhaps. That'll be in the conversation. Busy couple of weeks coming up here. Of course, we have Crown Jewel this weekend. Doing a full preview of that for Friday's show. Big show. Bigger than really normal, I guess you would say, based on these off, and I say, quote, off-month pay-per-views. We've been getting, 5-match cards, unless it's a SummerSlam or Mania or something like that. Doesn't seem to be the case for the show this weekend. Going to be a deeper card than that. I know some of that stuff has to do with the SmackDown spoilers this Friday, so I won't get into those. But we are going to get into on the show today. And thank you for watching live, if you're a member here at the WrestlingMatchShow.com, watching with everybody else at 5 p.m. Eastern, or after the fact, or listening wherever you get your podcast, thanks to our friends at the Believe Network. And make sure you are subscribed to the podcast feed so you don't miss a thing. Another way to take on the show, and do so for free. Anybody who is watching the show and want to comment with a super chat, we will get to those on the show today as well. If not today, we'll get to them tomorrow. I promise you that. So, coming off of last night, NXT. Now, a couple weeks settled in back into the Performance Center, which admittedly, I'm surprised that there wasn't more done to that to give it kind of a refresh. But okay, we're settled in now. And we knew about this ECW Arena show that was coming up. We saw it in Philadelphia with Bubba. We saw it again last night, coming off of Halloween Havoc. Mixing in and being open to mixing in the nostalgia of ECW has been something that WWE has toyed with for 20 plus years. The Invasion, One Night Stand, bringing various ECW legends back, or bringing back the letters, or going into Philadelphia and acknowledging where you're at. Saw it at WrestleMania this year. And I am a big fan of NXT taking the show on the road and doing it in a special way. I want to get into more of that in a little bit later on. So we'll talk about the ECW influence and appearances. RVD, Bubba. We're going to see Dawn Marie next week, all at the 2300 Arena, all at the ECW Arena. I'll get into more of that, what I think will come of those. And I feel like it's pretty easy to see where it's going. We'll see if it goes in that direction. I also wanted to talk about the state of the NXT women's division, because the buzzwords, the catchphrases, we heard it last night. We hear it every week. We see it in tweets. The best women's division in wrestling. Okay. I have often said it's the deepest. And I will say, based on last night, and not just last night, it's the most featured women's division. But why? Is there more to that than just the catchphrase, the buzzwords, of we have the deepest women's division. So I wanted to kind of really assess that NXT women's division that gets in-house praise that they have now taken as basically a marketing tool of we have the best. We said it, so it's true. And that's wrestling. I've said that about everybody. Every promoter, every promotion should be promoting big. It's entertainment. You should be promoting as such. You should be saying things like we have the best women's division, or we have the greatest champions, or this is where the big boys play, or whatever, or this person's having the run of their career. None of that stuff ever bothered me. It's part of promotion. It's part of entertainment. Everybody does it. The news does it. Politics does it. That's all. Believe me, if you're in America right now, that's all you're hearing about. This good, this bad, this bad, this good, whatever. It's just promotion. You can't take it that seriously. WWE is saying we have the best. Do they have the best? I throw that out to you as well. And I want you to think about that. Quantity doesn't mean quality. It doesn't. I like that a lot of women are getting opportunities on NXT to the point that, and this is what I'm going to really dive into, the women carry, and for a long time have carried NXT. And that's where I want to start with this whole thing. This is not a conversation that is solely about them having the best women's division. To me, this is a conversation about featuring the best of what you have based on your roster, featuring the people who have the most potential, who are the most ready. And I don't know if you're getting where I'm going with this. NXT has a lot of potential in the women's division. And we get to see that a lot. And as I say all the time, it is still developmental. But I bring that up because I want to take a look. I want to see if I can do this here. I'm going to try to do this here for you. Yes. For those watching. We're going to take a look right now, as I'm bringing it up, at the NXT roster. And for those listening, I'll talk about this more. We're going to not look at the women. We're going to look at the men. And we're going to look at who is playing a big role on this show, who has potential. As I look at just where the men's roster is, we see Andre Chase here. Obviously, Chase, you a consistent part of the show. Main event level? No. Background to put over Ridge as he gets pushed into the main event. You see Axiom there. Obviously, him and Nathan Frazier have been an active part of the show, a reliable tag team, good part of the show. But moving on here, there's Bronco Nima. There's Brooks Jensen. There you see Stax. There's Charlie Dempsey. He wrestled last night against Lexus King. Looking for people who we can see that are going to get elevated. Dante Chen, Duke Hudson, Eddie Thorpe, Idris Enofe. On and off the shows. Ethan Page. I've talked about how often he has been able to take over and become such a reliable part of the show. Why? Lack of depth. Hank and Tank, Javier, Javon Evans, obviously we see a lot. There's Joe Coffey, there's Josh Briggs, Lexus King, who gets a lot of resources sent his direction. Luca Crisafino, part of the family. Coffey Brothers, Miles Bourne, we've seen him, obviously, in No Quarter Catch Crew. Oba, big deal, obviously. There's Ridge, Ora Mensa, Riley Osborne, Sean Spears, Tank, Tavion Heights. Some of these people we've never seen in NXT before. Tony, Trick, Wesley. That's the whole men's division. I know I didn't say every name that I went through. But I say that to say, when you look at that, it's not that deep. A big reason that the women are featured so much is because there's more talent and there's more potential in the NXT women's division than there are with the men. I think that is something you can't ignore. And it's not a knock on the women. It just shows that I think there's more of them that have real potential. And on the show last night, completely naturally, not, hit over the head and it's all women. They opened the show with a casket match with Tatum and Wendy Chu. I thought they did a good job. I thought they had a fun casket match. And no problem saying it was the first women's casket match in WWE history. That's fine. You could bring that up. It was. It's, not something you see outside of Undertaker very often. It was fun. I don't want a casket match to necessarily be fun, but in the NXT universe where things kind of exist in their own bubble, it was solid. But they had a nice match, and we've seen them get booked consistently. That is, to me, I say this all the time. Pushes are not always about championships. If you're the world champ, sure. Or if it's going to be used to elevate you in a way, sure. But consistent appearances, consistent booking, that's a push. Hey, we have something for you, and we're going to continue with that. We're not going to skip a week. And believe me, that happened. I talked to so many people who were there in NXT who went through that. They're on one week, they're off the next, they're forgotten about, there's no vignette. They have filled in those gaps. But that was an issue in Triple H's NXT at times. Unless you were top of the card, sometimes you got forgotten about and you didn't get that consistent booking. I will say, really across the board in WWE for the last year plus, if you're on for a reason. You're not on to fill time. You're on to further a story, whether it's yours or somebody else's. You're on there for a reason. And that is absolutely, at least in ring, what I think is the way to describe NXT, especially the women's division. Now, you have those random faces that appear who, that's a trainee from somewhere. I think I saw them on Level Up once or whatever it may. Yeah, there's that bad acting backstage that happens. But then you look at what happened with Zarya and in her squash match last night. And what that set up, because she wins and, okay, here's her big debut and she's a monster and all that. And here comes toxic, fatal influence attraction. And here comes Roxanne and Cora, and you have 5-on-1. And then here comes Kalani Jordan, who has expressed earlier in the night to Ava, hey, I want Fallon. I want one North American Championship backs. Here comes Stephanie and Julia, 5-on-4. And then here comes Jordan Grace, who we haven't seen mixing it up in NXT in quite some time, who just dropped the TNA Knockouts Championship at Bound for Glory to Masha Slamovich. Interesting timing. She drops the title, and a couple days later, she is on NXT again. And all of that sets up a big brawl, which is fun. The crowd was into it, and we're getting a 10-woman tag team match next week. And that is when it hit me that I wanted to talk about the state of the NXT women's division. Because now you have the right mix. You have the right mix of experienced talent, developmental talent, international talent, people who have made their way and their paths to WWE in a lot of different ways. But on that one side, you have an abundance of experience with Jordynne Grace, with Stephanie Vaquer, with Julia, with Zarya, to a lesser extent, but she's done it, obviously. They signed her for a reason. And then, obviously, Kalani Jordan is the least experienced, but has been quite busy, has been quite consistent, and as I talked about, is someone they see a lot in because they throw her in a lot of different roles. She's always busy in a good way. And on the other side, Roxanne, plenty of experience. Core's got a good amount of experience, as does Fallon, as does JC Jane, Jasmine Nix. So now you look and say, they're going to throw out a 10-woman tag team match. 8 of the 10 people, 8 of the 10 participants in that match are not original WWE products. Jasmine Nix, Kalani Jordan. Those are the PC people. But I look at that and I say, hang on a second. Now, because I'm reassessing probably what I talked about a few months ago. Stephanie Vaquer, Julia, Zarya, all getting added to the mix. They weren't there a few months ago. Nerdy just said, I honestly think that Jordan is still with TNA. I also don't know how long her contract is. She is. But I feel like it's like the worst kept secret that everybody thinks she's going to WWE as soon as she can. And I don't know if there was something adjusted with her contract. It sounded like that was the case. I'd bet a lot of money that she will be a WWE contracted talent as soon as she can be. I don't know when that is. But if she is, throw her into the mix. And just the fact that, you know what, she's available right now to use. Here's what I think the NXT women's division is. It's the most consistently booked division, at least in terms of the women. If you're a part of that division and you've been given chances, you get those chances. Last night we saw, Nikita and Kalani Jordan and led the stuff with Rizzo. We saw the stuff where, Zarya got her squash and it set up the 10-women's tag. You saw Wendy Chu and Tatum Paxley and set that up. They carried the show last night, as they typically do. But I think it says something that you can look at a show like that last night and go, oh, yeah, the women were featured the most. That didn't come out as something that is an anomaly. That's just part of the show. So I do think they're very deep. I think they have a wealth of talent. And now I think they have the right talent in terms of experience to help the Kalani Jordans of the world, the Jasmine Nixes of the world, to get to the next level. And not to say that some of those names that I mentioned that weren't original WWE products don't need polish. And they do. That is absolutely a thing. Zarya goes from being Delta, very similar presentation in terms of her look at everything. You can go back and look at her stuff. I was flipping through her Instagram last night, just go, okay, so she's evolved it a little bit over time. Because I wasn't super familiar with her. I had heard the hype. But now you put on the WWE polish. You put on the production value of her doing kind of the Mad Max thing and, wrecking her way to NXT, and she's finally arrived. And that automatically makes her a bigger deal. WWE can always do that. That's why people go there. That's why I've always talked about the machine. If they put the machine behind you, and they want to put the machine behind you, the resources, the production, the vignettes, the social media buzz, the push. They could do that with anybody. Some of it takes, some of it doesn't take. But they could do that with anybody. Whether they're worth it or not, if they want to put that push and those resources and the machine behind you, That's how they can make a star better than anybody else. Now, listen, people like that get rejected. Sometimes it's very obvious. Hey, we're going with Roman Reigns coming out of the Shield breakup. And it didn't get to where they wanted to. And sometimes you see people push through that aren't supposed to get that push. Daniel Bryan is the perfect example. Revisionist history now is that it was the plan all along, and, they still talk about that when it comes up, and big deal and star, and he was pushed accordingly after that. But that wasn't how it was. He broke through. Did LA Knight break through? Yeah, you know what? He might have. I know Hunter liked LA Knight. I know Vince did. LA Knight might have had his job saved by Hunter with the Maximum Male Model stuff to get him out of that, to put him back to LA Knight. Seemed to work out for him. Wasn't the plan, at least not in Vince's eyes. But it's about being able to take their push and make something of it. In a few appearances, Zarya has jumped off the page with her look. She obviously can work. She can work in a big woman style. You saw her do the F5 and, the power moves and things like that. The spear. Side note, the spear is becoming the super kick. Too many people do that move. Too many people do that move at a time when there's a really good one out there. Braun Breaker. And you don't want that to get watered down. I also think it is very interesting that Zarya used the F5. I saw that and I went, okay, they're cool with her using it. I don't think she's using the F5 if Brock is or will be around. That was her finish. Works for her. That was her finish. Thought that was telling. And who knows? Maybe he'll show back up and she'll still use it. But it was interesting that it was, hey, because believe me, they go through that stuff. Hey, what's her finish going to be? Oh, F5. Okay, cool. Maybe a little hint as to the actual status of Brock Lesnar in WWE if they're giving a female in NXT his finish or being okay with her using that as a finish, whatever you want to say. Consistency is the name of the game when it comes to the NXT women's division. I don't think they automatically should be called the best women's division. But now with the depth they have in terms of the experience, they're getting closer to being able to claim that. Raw and SmackDown. I mean, think about it right now, right? What is the Raw? Here, let's do another Superstar page pull up here. And I know we're crossing over shows and all that. Here is I'll share my screen once again. Here is the NXT, let's just look at the Raw women's division. Let's just do that for right now, okay? Let's see how deep this Raw women's division is. Alba Fire, rarely see her. Asuka, injured. Becky Lynch still on this page for some reason. Tells you enough right there. Dakota Kai, unfortunately injured. Isla Dawn, you see her here and there. Ivy, we saw win on Monday against Zelina Vega. Io Sky, obviously very important part of the division, as is Kairi Sane. Katana Chance, neither her nor Kaden Carter has really advanced much and don't seem to bring much to the table. Kiana James has been MIA, injury, whatever. Liv Morgan has been a world champion where her championship has been secondary. Lyra Valkyria, on and off television. Maxine, more of a manager than a wrestler. Natalya back recently. She's kind of on and off television. They got to get Sam off there. Rhea, obviously a big deal. Saw her. Good move last night, building up their pay-per-view by having her get attacked and show up on the show and get a little bit of a rub. Scarlett's not a wrestler. Shayna, obviously, in the stud line, as Mia Yim calls it, as is Sonya and Zoe. And who is consistently booked in this division? Rhea and Liv. That's it. Kyrie and Io obviously are good. That's it, though. They don't do a lot. It's not even close to the NXT. We'll go over to SmackDown now. B-Fab, second for the Profits. Obviously, Bayley's consistent. Bianca, probably should be more consistent. Blair Davenport has been on and off. Candice and Indy have now found their way into the stuff with Nia, and Candice winning that speed title, and nobody cares about it. Chelsea's obviously a standout player all the time, and her and Piper are a fun team, and they fill television time. And I shouldn't even say fill. They make the most of their minutes, especially Chelsea. Elektra Lopez, fodder in the background. Indy, pretty much the same. Say what you will about Jade and Bianca. I don't think they're featured in a big enough way. I think they've been hindered by being a tag team at times. I've been happy to see Meechin get more of a look. Very reliable. You see Naomi on a fairly consistent basis. Obviously, Nia with Tiffany doing her thing. Tegan Nox has been out of the mix. Tiffany Stratton's been solid. But it's not that deep. And it's not that consistently pushed. Like, there's not multiple stories. I think I saw, and listen, I know it's a headline, so I don't want to go overboard with this. I think I saw Bianca in an interview say, I hope there's a non-title singles women's match at WrestleMania. Think about that. 2025 she'll be talking about. Someone who has main evented WrestleMania. Someone who has wrestled Becky, Sasha. Top names. Big marquee matches at WrestleMania. And she's hoping there's a non-title singles women's match. Yet, we can turn on NXT last night and see a casket match between Tatum Paxley and Wendy Chu. We didn't see any title matches last night on NXT. We saw a former champion try to get back to her winning ways. We saw a debuting Zarya try to do that. To establish herself on who she is. Those were non-title singles matches. It's not asking a lot. It's a weird thing that Bianca even has to say it, but she's not wrong. Like, other than what? Celebrity matches? Do we ever get non-title women's singles matches? That's kind of wild. WrestleMania 41, last year, right? And I'm giving myself a reminder of the card so I can look. Rhea and Becky open the show. Title match. Jade, Bianca, and Naomi beat Damage Control. No title, nothing. Really just a way to get Jade on the card and Bianca on the card. And so ends our in-ring female representation on night one of WrestleMania. 2 women's matches. On night 2, Bayley beat Io Sky for the WWE Women's Championship. And that was the one and only women's match on night 2 of WrestleMania. They got 3 matches. By comparison, the men got every other match on the 14 match card. You can find a way to get a Philadelphia street fight that had so little heat with the pride of Bobby Lashley, Dawkins, and Montez Ford against the Final Testament to really just be a backdrop for Bubba to do ECW spots. They got LA Knight and AJ Styles on there as a singles match. They put some work into that one. There is no secondary championship amongst the women on Raw or SmackDown, and I'm okay with that. But hey, there's Logan Paul, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton. Not that they shouldn't be on the card. Just more of an example of, hey, we'll make room for that. You know, they found a way to get Rey and Andrade on the show against Santos and Dirty Dom. And yeah, Dirty Dom's very popular, but like, it's not exactly been a hot run for Andrade or Santos or post LWO Santos, or anything, but they got him on the show. So for Bianca to say that, it's unfortunately true. Yet on NXT, they're carrying the show. I think the women are presented more importantly at times in AEW, but maybe not as consistently. You do wonder in the next 5 to 10 years how many other women will be retiring, shuttled away from the spotlight, and then this deep, talented, full of potential NXT women's division, how do they fill those gaps? Can they fill those gaps? And when they fill those gaps, do they fill them in a big way? Do they become as big of part of the shows on Raw and SmackDown as they are right now in NXT? Is that where we're going in WWE? Because I went through that men's NXT roster. It's not that deep. There is not a ton of potential there to get excited about. Some people are probably in their peak in terms of what their push will be or how far their character will go or whatever right now in NXT. When people start to wind down, when people who we've seen on our television for a long time start to step back a little, who's filling those spots? Who's filling the spots of a New Day in 5 years? Who's filling the spot of a Miz in 5 years? Is that depth actually there? Did WWE take a look at the entire landscape and what their roster looks like right now and go, hey, we probably need to figure out a different kind of pipeline? Because to me, it felt like for a time, and this could still be true, the PC was not pumping out enough main roster talent, at least in terms of the men. Not to say that that was their only avenue, but they put a lot into that NIL program, and I don't think it's coming through the way they had hoped. And I've always said, forever, there's not, and there shouldn't be, just one way to build your roster. It's like that in sports. You draft, you develop, you sign free agents, you figure out the mix. WWE has the money to do that. They have the money, even if it's wasted, to do an NIL program, to house a bunch of people in Florida in the warehouse of those rings and train them and get them up to speed and hopefully get them to a place where they can be money makers for the company. I don't think they've gotten a ton out of that, which is why you still need to have other avenues of acquiring talent or finding talent. And if that means throwing out big money or signing people away from other companies, bringing in a Stephanie Vaquer, bringing in a Julia, signing Zarya, signing Ethan Page, what they're doing with TNA, sharing talent, maybe then signing that talent. But my big thing was there's another big company that runs every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. That is not WWE, but allows for big-time television experience, the most promotion you're going to get outside of WWE, and if they're on display Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday in AEW, maybe they get to the point where they want to go elsewhere. Then WWE can go, hey, we like Ethan Page. We like Shawn Spears. We like Lexis King. We want to bring back Cody Rhodes. AEW is not as big as WWE, but they're out there. This is not bringing Sting in and going, we don't know what he's been doing since WCW closed. No, we know he's in TNA. Everybody knows that. I hated when they did that. Oh, they've been on hiatus for all the... No, they're not. And it's not to say that when Ethan Page showed up, it was, he's in the other... Like, no. But it wasn't ignoring it either. And not to say that Ethan Page was this big star in AEW. He never got that opportunity. There were starts and stops and all that. And hey, look, he's flourishing in NXT right now. But I really thought, and it could still feel this way, that NXT or WWE as a whole looks at AEW and says, we're always going to keep an eye on that place. Because if people become available, Jade Cargill, then we can go get them. We can afford to pay them if we want to. And they didn't sign Okada. And they didn't sign Will Ospreay. And they didn't bring back Mercedes Moné. And I don't know how deep of the conversations really got. I don't know if any of those people wanted to definitely go to WWE or just wanted to have the conversation, just wanted to listen. The Young Bucks did that. Kenny Omega did that. They did that before AEW started. They had those conversations. Cody did as well. It's a great thing for pro wrestling to have options for companies to have to pay up. It's why WWE talent are starting to get paid and paid more now because they're important parts of the show. And if you're an important part of WWE in the last year to 2 or 3 years, you're a pretty well-known star. You've had the machine behind you. That should create an asset if you were to leave the company for another place. If a Kevin Owens or a Drew McIntyre or a Rhea Ripley or a Becky Lynch were to go elsewhere, they bring a fan base, they bring a lot of cachet, and you can go, hey, what about Mercedes? And she does. You could say, I don't know how well that's gone in AEW, and that's fair. The jury's still out there. There's been good, there's been bad. But there is a lot of name value that comes with that. And because of people getting a push and getting the machine behind them and getting that exposure and being part of WWE at a hot time, it makes their value go up. And if WWE wants to stick with them, they get paid. And if not, they have options. WWE did not want to bring back Bobby Lashley, or they couldn't come to an agreement. And he has certainly said some things that have indicated that it didn't really end all that well. And that might, whether they're right or wrong, I don't know. I've talked plenty about the lack of handling Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits. That we've talked about that plenty. Bobby seemed to indicate he felt like he was kind of getting his legs chopped out. He wasn't being treated the way he should have been, and I tend to agree with that. And if he's about to pop up in AEW, I hope he allows or is allowed to be what he should be. We're going to see Swerve and Shelton Benjamin tonight on Dynamite. Shelton Benjamin's presentation over the last month has been the strongest he has been presented in forever. And I think he is coming through on that. I have said that there is a lack of big guys getting pushed in AEW, especially on the heel side. You need those kind of people for baby faces to overcome. If we're heading towards Swerve and Bobby Lashley here, that's exactly the kind of people Swerve should be facing. Not to say he's going to win or get the only wins, but it's a good opponent for Swerve. It's a building opponent for Swerve. And we're going to see how Bobby Lashley is eventually received, I assume, in AEW. I think it could go quite well. I think he's different than what they have. I've said it a lot. You don't realize it as much, but AEW as a whole has from a size perspective, a smaller average roster than WWE does. So when a Shelton Benjamin shows up, he stands out a bit more. And it's obviously who you put him in the ring against. You do the stuff with Leo and Sammy Guevara and all that, and you want to present him a certain way. But there ain't many people that you're going to put up against Bobby Lashley in AEW and go, oh, that guy's way bigger. Like, Bobby's massive. You have your big bills. You have your Lance Archers. Brian Cage, obviously. Satnam. But Billy Gunn is still one of the biggest guys in the company, and he's 60 years old. He looks great, but it's just not a big man company. It's not what it is. Nerdy, I disagree with you on the AEW point, Matt. Their roster is fine. Right now, Mercedes Moné, Mariah are champions. You have Chris Statlander, Willow Nightingale, Gio Hart. I don't have an issue. I think AEW's roster is stacked. From a talent standpoint, they're loaded. No concern. I probably would still lean on, from a quality standpoint, them having the best women's roster. From a quality standpoint. Doesn't mean it's always the most consistently booked, but there's a lot of quality in the AEW women's division. There's no doubt about that. If I had to pick, not necessarily based on booking or anything, but I said, who's got the most talent that is TV ready, that belongs on television every week? I'd say it's the AEW women's roster, but the NXT women's roster has closed the gap significantly, which, by the way, is great for wrestling fans. It's fantastic. Women have proven to be moneymakers, to be merch movers, to be ratings grabbers for a variety of reasons. Not like what it used to be in the 90s when it was just about, TNA and all that stuff. TNA, not TNA. Not about bra and panties matches and gravy bowl. No, it's about who they are as characters. Now, as I've said, and I know that a lot of people have brought this up, I don't like that the world women's champion in Liv Morgan is in a spot where it doesn't really feel like her title is first and foremost. It feels like it's about her relationship. And you need character stuff and love triangles and all that stuff connects. But it feels like that has been the dominant part of her story. And very rarely is about her championship. Now you could say, hey, who cares? Her stuff clicks well. Her stuff with Dom clicks well. They do 1 million views on YouTube. And WWE, I'm sure, is happy with that. And I don't know if she's cool with that. She's being featured more than she's ever been featured before. She has been getting more main event level stories and angles and positioning than she ever has before. She might be very happy to be Dom's girlfriend and the world women's champion and having Raquel by her side. I'm sure everybody that's involved with that is pretty happy with that. The money that's coming in off of that. It's not about her having matches. It's not about her defending the title. It's about her being a shit stirrer. Her being a thorn in the side of Rhea Ripley. Her throwing it in her face. There's a story there that people are invested in. As I've said it many times, it's not for me, but it is for a lot of people. And I recognize that. Another aspect of NXT I wanted to discuss coming off of last night, and I'd love to know the philosophy and the thought process. As we sit here in late 2024 and you look at the you look at the NXT roster, it's young. It should be young. We are talking about people that are in their mid-20s, early 20s, some later 20s, some are in the 30s. So if you do the math on that, it's a bit wild that we are talking up a promotion that has been dead for 23 years. ECW has been dead as a promotion for 23 years. WWE buying ECW, putting it on their airwaves, rebranding it. It's not this. That's the WWE. That's not ECW. Dawn Marie, Bubba. Those are not. Those are people from the original ECW, not from the Sheamus, Goldust, Zack Ryder, Christian, Tommy Dreamer, Jack Swagger, CM Punk, Matt Stryker, Elijah Burke, ECW. By the way, the WWE version of ECW was not a bad show. It just had the wrong branding on it. I think it would have been looked upon very differently in history if it was called NXT or something else from the jump. It was never what ECW was. They just used the branding. But for a brand, a promotion that for all intents and purposes has been dead for 23 years, I find it interesting that WWE is reaching back into that history. It's not even really their history, to promote their developmental brand, NXT, their youngest brand. Their brand that the majority of wrestlers who are on it were either not alive or extremely young for ECW. And look, we have Peacock. We have the WWE Network. We're going to have AEW on Max. We have New Japan World. We have all of these ways to watch wrestling and see stuff from the past, and there's clip going up all the time. Of course you can educate yourself. But it seems weird in a way to go, remember that promotion from 20 plus years ago? Yeah, we're going to use that to help promote NXT next week. And I promise you, there are a lot of people in NXT locker room that have had to learn what the hell ECW is or was. Absolutely, that's a thing. So next week at the ECW Arena in Philadelphia, we have 2 ECW originals being used, 3, I guess, if you count RVD. But the major one is Bubba Dudley. Full disclosure, obviously, from time to time, I work with Bubba on Busted Open Radio. I think I've only worked with him once, maybe twice since I've come back earlier this year. Worked more with Dreamer, worked more with Mark Henry, Denise, and the Sunday guys. But I've known Bubba for quite some time. Bubba, admittedly, I don't agree with everything he says. I know he can be rough around the edges. I know he can be brash and abrasive. I've also, to be fair, learned from him. We have different mindsets about certain things, but we actually agree on other things. It's just how we deliver it. And he helped me in House of Hardcore, and I think we played off each other well on the radio. And he has been, whether you like it or not, someone who's been able to keep his name out there, continues to get bookings, continues to stay in the wrestling universe in some way, shape, or form, whether it be via Busted Open or TNA or working at Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling over the last weekend or whatever it may be. He has stayed in the mix. Seems to have some kind of, legends, whatever with WWE. And now, and I don't know how this came together, he goes from working the pre-show with LaGreca, and good for those guys, to turning that into, which is obviously the plan, something with Ridge. And that turning into something with Ridge is now becoming a tag match where Ridge and Ethan Page are going to take on the number one babyface in NXT, Trick Williams, who is getting that ECW Hall of Fame, we want tables rub from Bubba. And we got a lot of Bubba between Halloween Havoc and last night in NXT. If you want to connect the dots that seem the most obvious, and I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing, we will see how it plays out. It feels like, if you listen to Bubba's promo towards Trick, I actually enjoyed the part where he's like, hey, I was watching the entrance when Ethan and Ridge were beating you up and nobody came out. Why is that? Because you're the champ. And the champ can't have friends. And I like that. I think it's a very good, I've said this a lot about WWE current day. They have now made it where you need to have backup. There's a lot of factions. There's a lot of rivalries. There's a lot of multi-person rivalries. There's a lot of, it all started with Roman. You got to have your backup. There are strength in numbers. Cody had to find a way to divide and conquer. And he did that. And Bubba was saying to Trick, you don't have any friends. So I came out and saved you. Trick's like, cool, I want revenge. Let's do it together. But Bubba gave him all the warning signs that a veteran Hall of Famer would give to Trick. He got close to Trick. He backed Trick up. He put Trick over. He talked about doing all the extra. Bubba did the greatest hits of songs he never played last night. I got to go to the extreme, Bubba. It was a very over-the-top babyface promo, which is not Bubba. And nor should it be. So Ridge and Page talk, and they basically goad Bubba out there, and he attacks. And you still need that partner? Let's do it next week. And so next week, it's Bubba and Trick against Ethan and Ridge. And I would fully expect by the end of the night, whether they win the match or it happens during the match, that Bubba's going to lay out Trick. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Trick Williams defends the NXT Championship against Bubba. And Bubba will put him over. And Bubba will get a bunch of appearances out of that. If you didn't see it yesterday, they set him up at the Performance Center to do Busted Open yesterday. So there's an understanding there. We're also going to see Dawn Marie, who hasn't been featured on programming in forever, be the referee for a hardcore match between Jada Parker and Lola Vice. That feels like a weird one to me. Also makes me wonder if it's smart to have Dawn Marie on the payroll with a lot of things that are going on legally. I'll leave that at that. And we're going to see RVD, who had these random appearances last night with Ava, being like, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I'll be at the show. And then there's the pull apart at the end of the show. And he's like, yeah, I know what I'm going to do next week. See you next week. Okay. Now RVD mixes in because he's multi-generational and multi-company. There are people that look at RVD and go, I remember one of a kind guy. I remember, he was the hardcore champ. He was the IC champ. He was the WWE champ for a time. There are people that look at RVD and know him because of WWE, and there's people that look at RVD and know him because of ECW. And there's people that know him because of both. Sure. To me, he is, the biggest crossover from ECW. He's the biggest. Maybe I'm wrong. In terms of a regularly featured ECW wrestler from the original ECW, I feel like he has had the biggest career in terms of WWE. Not to say that others haven't, but, I don't like Austin's not an ECW wrestler to me. RVD is. Ray went through ECW, but it's not like his home, as did Eddie Guerrero, as did others, as did Jericho, as did Mick Foley. But they made their names in a bigger way moving on from there. RVD was very well known, was arguably the most popular ECW guy of all time, and then became super popular in WWE. So, I think he continues to hold some of the most active star power from the original ECW because of what he did there and what he did in WWE. Nerdy Dude says, what's the point of the women's hardcore match? I just don't get it. Why would you book a match like that? Because they tried to be on the same page and then they weren't, and now they want to fight each other. And I'm okay with that. You're throwing Dawn Marie in. It's kind of random. Will we get any other surprises? Meanie's in Philly all the time. He might be around. The ECW arena, I will tell you, is not, if you haven't seen it in a while, the one you've seen on grainy footage. It is not the bingo hall that ECW used to run in. Indie shows run there quite often. MMA shows, boxing runs. They have an old, if you think about you go to a basketball game or hockey and they have the 4-board TVs above the rink or above the court. They have a small one of those now over the ring at the ECW arena. They built out a nice, it's a nicer place. It's still the bones of what the ECW arena used to be are still there, but it doesn't have that same hardcore feel. There's banners up, and I'm interested to see what they leave up because there's ECW and hardcore banners and 2300 Hall of Fame banners. That's all up. I'm interested to see how they dress the place up because I don't think we have seen anything get broadcast from there since Evolve ran there and WWE put it on the WWE Network. So I want to see how they dress it up. But there's a lot of capabilities to make it look pretty damn good, and you wouldn't necessarily know that, it used to be a bingo hall and Viking hall and all that stuff back in the 90s. It's cool that they're running there. I want to get back to that for a second. I am a big fan of running venues that stand out. I am a big fan of running venues that become part of the show. I would love someone to go back to the Mall of America. Other than First Wrestling, who's done it the last couple of years, I would love AEW to run there. I would love to be, to see a match on the beach or a venue like that, or Club La Vila, or those are fun shows to me. So next week, NXT at the ECW arena. I want to see how the current production of WWE presents that, because that's pretty cool. Nerdy Dude says, also, Matt, I know you'll talk about it tomorrow more in depth, but hear me out. I can't take the BCC serious anymore because when they beat up Orange Cassidy a couple weeks ago, there was a shot. There was a shot of what? See, to me, they've close up of Claudio kicking Orange, and you can see how Claudio barely touched. It happens. Zarya hit a bad headbutt on Saturday night or at Halloween Havoc on Sunday. That stuff happens. Cameras catch things. Not a big deal. I liked how fired up Orange got last week. I'm excited that they are making a point to say he's appearing and he's going to talk. Please check out my article I wrote for the DraftKings Network last week, talking about the 5 opponents that Jon Moxley needs to face in this championship reign. Orange Cassidy is number 1 on that list, and I think that's where we are going for Full Gear. but it's just the start. And I basically wrote about the 5 baby faces that will contribute, and there could be more than that, to the Jon Moxley championship reign to make it matter more, and how each one of those men can be booked against Moxley to help themselves, but to also really get over Moxley as this world champion. But we will get into that tomorrow, coming off of AEW, a little bit more with their Fright Night show. Remember, ECW Arena show next week for NXT is up against AEW on Wednesday night because they're staying off of election night in America. So that's where that is. Love to hear your thoughts on the ECW inclusion in NXT. How do you feel about it? Do you think it works? Do you think it helps someone like Trick or Ethan or Ridge Holland? Do you have any care of that? Do you care about the nostalgia? Did you hear about Dawn Marie and go, who the hell is that? Leave us in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Make sure you subscribe at thewrestlingmatchshow.com, to the YouTube for free, to our podcast for free. And if you want to become a member, you would have gotten this show with Nerdy Dude and everybody else who's a member at 11 a.m. Eastern. Everybody else gets it at 5 p.m. Eastern. But if you want to be a member, that's where you can really take advantage of when the show airs early, which is 11 a.m. Eastern every single weekday here at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Head over to prowrestlingtees.com/thewrestlingmat. Get your Wrestling Mat merch there. You get discounts if you are a Mat member, so make sure you go check that out. Hit that join button down below. Head over to our community page on YouTube and check out more. Make sure you follow us on social media at WrestlingMat23 on Twitter and Instagram, at the Matt Camp on Twitter and Instagram. Let us know your thoughts about the show, what you want to see here. Tomorrow we'll get into way more on Dynamite, and it'll be Halloween. If I can put something together, I will. Thank you for joining me, and as always, I'll be back to talk about wrestling even more tomorrow right here on The Wrestling